Pythagoras was born in Greece 569 BC. He is credited as being the father of mathematics and the father of geometry. He is also considered to be the father of music. He discovered the mathematical relationship of the musical intervals, harmonic ratios in the overtone series. He taught that you could heal using harmonic frequencies in sound. He was the first person to prescribe music as medicine. He's considered the father of harmonics, and he applied the principles of harmonics to everything from music, art, architecture, to personal development, friendship, raising families, even running governments. We can rely on a succession of credible scholars to substantiate that Pythagoras was born 2,575 years ago in Greece on a small island called Samos. He lived for approximately 100 years. At a remarkably early age, he exhibited an unparalleled attraction to learning. His father was a wealthy and influential merchant from Tyrus and ensured that Pythagoras received the best education conceivable. He not only studied with the preeminent scholars of his time, but he rapidly surpassed them. This enlightened luminary matured into one of the greatest living masters in history. He contributed important developments in the field of astronomy. Pythagoras was the first known Westerner to declare that the Earth was round, and he taught that the sun was the center of the solar system. Many of his theories were controversial in the West up until the time of Copernicus 2,000 years later. He demonstrated that day and night were the result of the Earth's revolution around the sun. Pythagoras understood and could mathematically predict solar and lunar eclipses as well as the position of the planets at any date in the future. He was the first to divide the Earth into 5 climatic zones ranging from cold polar to warmer equatorial regions. And he taught that the changes of the seasons were due to the tilt of the Earth's axis relative to the sun. Pythagoras was the first to point out that the morning and evening stars were in fact the same planet Venus. He studied the legal system in Crete and Sparta, where he mastered the foundations of law and government. Eventually, he conducted the greatest visionary social experiment in history. During the second half of his life, the Senate continuously sought counsel from Pythagoras. As a result, he exerted tremendous political and governmental influence throughout the region. He's also considered the father of philosophy. In fact, he was the first person to introduce the word philosophy, which means love of wisdom. His teachings, the golden verses, and the introduction of his doctrine of universal compassion for all living beings are a testament to his transcendent genius. He's also considered the father of vegetarianism in Europe. Up until 40 years ago, this selection of food was called a Pythagorean diet. He's considered the founder of the Essene tradition. His community was a prototype for the Essene movement, a later derivative of the Pythagorean movement from which Christ emerged and from whom early Christianity had its origin. The Essenes during Christ's time were called Jewish Pythagoreans. Pythagoras was the first person to originate the term and concept known as harmony of the spheres. He loved inventing single words that represented whole fields of knowledge. For instance, he was the first person to coin the word cosmos, which refers not only to the entire universe, but also the perfect order throughout it. He taught that exact laws of harmony were perceptible and measurable, and this perfect order is pervasive everywhere, all the time, from the atomic to the cosmic. Pivotal to his teachings is the comprehension that this order has intelligence streaming through it. And this universal intelligence is accessible through sound. Using vibration, he was able to align the individual to their true divine nature. It was with the monochord and the phenomena of a vibrating string that he was able to demonstrate to his disciples the ubiquitous omnipresence of harmonics as it exists throughout the entire universe. Interesting that even today, modern quantum physicists use the term string theory to communicate an understanding of our universe. Nada Brahma is Sanskrit for all is vibration. Uni means one, verse, song, universe, one song. Here's where it gets really significant. Pythagoras was the first and the last. meaning the only Westerner ever to be admitted and initiated into the Egyptian temples. It is well documented that Pythagoras spent 23 years in these institutions. He's the only outsider in history to become fluent in the Egyptian language, its written characters, and their enigmatic and incomprehensible hieroglyphics. It was here that he mastered mathematics, medicine, music, geometry, architecture, astronomy, the ancient mysteries and rituals, including the stages and evolution of the soul. He brought this wisdom to the West. Pythagoras is considered the founding forefather of Western civilization. One has to ask the following question: why were we never taught this information in school? The fact is that the origins of our culture are deeply rooted in ancient mysticism by an Egyptian initiate. Before his quest in Egypt, he was of course influenced by the writings of Orpheus and familiar with the philosophical schools of Iona. He was initiated into the mysteries of Babylos, Tyre, and initiated into the rites of Baal and Ashtara. He was also initiated into the cult of Morgos. He toured all the oracles of Greece. He settled into solitary hermitage on the slopes of Mount Carmel, secluded in caves where prophecies of Elijah and Elisha were originated. He had perfect comprehension of the principles of ritual as they were applied to all religion of his time. After 23 years of assimilating Egyptian scholarship, the king of Persia invaded and conquered Egypt. They executed the pharaoh, captured Pythagoras, and took him prisoner to Babylon. They were quick to recognize Pythagoras as a great master. He was allowed to absorb firsthand the wisdom of the Chaldeans, the renowned astronomers and astrologers. He acquired knowledge from the academies of Persia. He was introduced to the most prominent sages, savants, scholars throughout Syria. Pythagoras participated in elaborate purification ceremonies, including consumption of homa and the holy fires of Ashura Mazda. It was at this time he perfected his knowledge of number, astronomy, harmony, and the ability to predict the future with regards to celestial events. With the death of the king of Persia, Pythagoras was allowed to leave Babylon after 12 years. He finally returned home briefly to his native island Samos. Pythagoras was 55 when he started his community in Crotone, bestowing all his accumulated wisdom to the Western world at a time when Greek civilization was yet unborn. He established a society-university-commune that became the greatest assemblage of devout geniuses the world has ever seen. Thus, his distinction as being the founding forefather of Western civilization. He incorporated a system of gender equality, which was unheard of in his time. Pythagoras was the first person to allow women into the highest echelons of all institutions, governmental, spiritual, and scientific. It was here that he realized that leadership in a political system should not be occupied by individuals of nobility, wealth, power, or military domination, because this always led to corruption and abuse. Nor should leadership result from the majority rule, democracy, because this always leads to mediocrity. His greatest contribution was creating a political system whose leadership was composed of enlightened scientists and initiates placed in strategic positions of influence.